Well, welcome everybody. It is a Thursday morning. I hope you all are staying warm and dry, and the folks you're working with are safe. The weather has turned kind of icky lately, and in fact, I will mention that I believe there are some severe weather shelters that are activating throughout the county. So maybe once I'm done with the introductions, I'll try to go find the page on the King County Regional Homelessness Authority where they're going to be updating that information so you all can have that. We are here for the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF, and the WorkFirst training. We have our fabulous partners from Solid Grounds Benefits Legal Assistance Program. We have Brittany Lowe and Patricia Bowen here. They can do a little intro into themselves when I hand that over, but just some housekeeping. We record all of these trainings. They go up on our YouTube channel pretty quickly, like maybe even same day. And then Tim, if you are aware and have been to any of our trainings, our membership meetings, does a fabulous recap of a blog that includes both the recording, the slides, any materials that get posted or thrown into the chat. So that's a really fabulous resource after the fact to either go back and review and dive deeper into some of the stuff, share with your colleagues who may not have been able to make it here. We are very, very good about monitoring the chat for questions, comments. You are also welcome to raise your Zoom hand and come off mute. You will only be recorded and captured in the recording if you come off of mute. So just being on camera won't include you, but if you come off mute, that's when you will be included. So just a heads up there. Someone has already enabled closed captioning, so that's a tool available to you if that is helpful. Please feel free to reach out to myself, Kristen, Tim, as coalition staff, if you're struggling with anything. And I think on that note, well, we also have the advocacy power half hour after this training, and our other colleague, Hallie Willis, who's our community policy manager, is going to join at that time to share sort of what's still really happening and what we're advocating for at the state legislature. We have a few days left before it's over, and there have been some important bills that we want to share with you that are very much related to TANF. There's still some really heavy work in advocacy that we want to be doing related to the budget and funding for homelessness, housing, and human services work. So hopefully you can stick around for that and hear that good news. On that note, I'm going to hand it over to Brittany and Patricia. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having us. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you cannot see the presentation. Perfect.
You're good.
Perfect. Okay, so just a short and sweet introduction. As you said, we're here for the TANF and WorkFirst presentation today. My name is Patricia, or Patty Bowen. I'm the new program manager or managing attorney here at VLA's Solid Ground. With me is Brittany Lowe. She is our staff attorney here at VLA as well. So before we jump into the actual training itself, we do want to give an acknowledgement to the fact that, like many things in our society, benefits law is strife with policies and systems that are inherently racist. They were founded in racism and still do have systemic racism built into them. Obviously, our work here today and our work in general is trying to overcome that. But as it exists in this country, it is still rampant with, stereotypes and stigmas associated with public assistance. So we want to acknowledge that before we jump into the training. And if you're interested in reading more about that, the slides should be shared with you, and you can click on the links and read some articles about that history as well. So just a brief overview. Today we're going to talk about the TANF overall. TANF WorkFirst, WorkFirst support systems, the sanction process, additional programs available to TANF families, tips on how to avoid some of those benefit pitfalls, and then what the hearing and appeal process can look like. So one thing that BLA offers, because you are here participating in our presentation, is we want to share this resource with you. It's called Ask a Lawyer program. What it is it's an email available to you guys. We ask that you not share it with clients themselves, but you can share it with other partners in the community. It is just benefitslegalhelp@solidground.org. You can email us. It goes directly to our legal staff, and we can answer legal questions or just support questions so that hopefully you're able to help your clients before it escalates to the point of needing a lawyer's intervention. So if you have a very specific scenario that you want to ask questions about, even if it's today, but you're not necessarily comfortable going into details about what that is in a recording, you're welcome to email us. We will get back to you as quickly as possible, and we can give you individualized advice as to the details that you provide us. So again, this will be in the presentation that was emailed out to you, but you can also write it down. It's just benefits legal help. We do ask that in the subject line, you say ask a lawyer. That way we can flag it. We know that that email is specifically asking for advice and not, for example, a referral or something like that. So jumping in, what is TANF? First of all, it stands for Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. It is a cash assistance program that's available to low-income families. It is based on gross monthly income, so that's before taxes, family size, resource availability, and citizenship status. So we'll go over exactly what you have to, where you have to fall within those to be eligible, but those are kind of the general realms that we look at for eligibility. So it is a limited scope service. In general, those benefits are only available for a 60-month time period within the participant's lifetime. However, there are numerous exceptions to this time limit, and we will go specifically into all of those. In addition to participate in TANF, you have to participate in WorkFirst, which is a pathway to employment program. We'll dive into details about that as well. And as a part of that, you must follow an IRP, an individual responsibility plan. In addition, pregnant or parenting teens may be eligible for TANF if it's an approved living situation as well. So it's not just adults with children, it can also be teens as well. So this is the payment standard. What that means is this is the actual amount of money that would be paid to you if you were eligible for the program. This is the maximum amount. So the payment standard is basically synonymous with the benefits amount. For example, if you are a family of 2 and you are eligible for the program and you have no income, you would get that $570. However, if you have other sources of income, that is compared to and subtracted from this, and we'll go into detail on that on the next slide. I do want to point out, however, that this is one of the changes that has happened since last year. There's been an 8% increase in these payment amounts. So last year, a one-person family could only get, I think it was $416. Now it's $450. So that is a fairly substantial increase, which we're happy to see. Hopefully that trend continues. So here's this example of how to actually figure out your benefits based on your income. So there's 2 types of income. There's what's called earned income and there's unearned income. And it's not as logical as you might think. Some of it makes sense. If you have a job that pays you a amount of money for your services, that is earned income. Everything else, even Social Security, which sometimes feels like earned income, you know, you've banked it from your earnings, it's still considered unearned income. So that's the differentiation. For the money that you are taking home from a job, so that earned income, you do a 50% comparison. So you take the total amount that you have earned, you divide it by half. That is the amount you compare to the income limit that is on the right side of the screen. So, for example, if you make $1,000, you're not comparing that $1,000 to the earned income limit. You are subtracting half of that, and you are comparing $500 to the earned income limit on the right. Versus, for example, a Social Security, which is unearned income, if you are taking home $500, that is the full comparison. You don't subtract half of it. In addition to these income limits, there are resource limits. These are also one of the substantial changes in 2024, which is great. It used to be that there was a $6,000 resource limit. That has doubled this year. So this is referencing liquid resources. So cash, money in a savings account, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, anything that can be turned into cash or utilized immediately. It is not equity in a house. It is not, you know, the furniture that you owned, if you sold it, what that would be worth. It's none of that. It's cash on hand or in a bank account. The other thing they look at is equity in vehicles. And again, up until this year, they would look at every vehicle you owned. This year, however, they have changed that. And the first vehicle you have as a family, as long as it is used either for transportation of the household members or to transport a physically disabled member of the household, it is exempt. So it doesn't matter how much it's worth. It could be a $20,000 car. It is exempt if it's used for primary means of transportation. If you have a second or third vehicle, they would look at the value of that car. However, they look at the value minus what you still owe. So if it's a $10,000 car and you still have $8,000 in car payments, it's only the subtraction. So it's a $2,000 increase to your, or rather, amount to be considered into your resource limit, not that full $10,000. And again, if it's your primary car, you would not consider it. So that is a great change. There's also one change that will be coming soon. So I just spoke about earned income. We do that half comparison. So you'd take the, for example, $1,000, you'd subtract that 500, half of it, and you compare 500 to the resource or to the income limit. Come August, there will be a second deduction that they do, or a disregard that they do as well. And that happens first. So in the example, we still have that family with $1,000 income. Before we divide it by 50%, you have a $500 disregard. So you take the $1,000, you subtract 500 right off the top. Then the remaining $500 is what you look at to divide and compare. So initially, in this example, it's a family of 3. They have $1,000 monthly earned income. As of right now, they would be looking at taking home $206. However, in August, because we'll have that 500 disregard, their amount of take-home assistance from TANF would increase to $456. So that's a really exciting future change that is guaranteed, but just hasn't taken effect yet. And if you have questions about a specific situation or family that you're thinking of and wanting to go through the specifics of that math, we're happy to do that with you. Like I said, please reach out to us at Ask a Lawyer. We're happy to do that math because I do realize it can get a little confusing. There are a couple other eligibility requirements for qualifying for TANF. One of those is there is an immigration status requirement. So because this is a federal program, even though it's being administered at a state level, there is a requirement that you are a US citizen. If you are not, there are other programs available, such as what's on the screen, the State Family Assistance Program. But for TANF itself, you do have to be a US citizen or lawful resident. You also do have to be a Washington state resident to qualify for TANF in Washington. If you're the resident of a different state, then you need to check the state requirements for that state where you are a resident. Also, as the name might have given away, you do have to be caring for children to qualify for TANF, or you have to be pregnant or caring for someone who is pregnant. There are some exceptions to this. For example, if you're caring for a relative's child, if you are a legal guardian of a child, or you are acting in the place of a parent, you can also qualify. So for example, if you are a grandparent caring for your grandchild, you could still qualify. Or if you are a foster parent who's adopted, you're now their legal guardian, you can qualify as well. If you have any specifics, again, please let us know. We'd be happy to answer. And with that, I will pass it over to Brittany.
I'm Brittany Lowe. I'm a benefits attorney at Solid Ground with Patty. I'm glad everybody came today. Thanks so much. My pronouns are she, her, and as a benefits attorney, I work every day with applicants and recipients of the TANF program. So we'll just continue here. The next section that we're going to talk about is just situations where children are approved for TANF. So the first, in loco parentis, that's when you have a child living with someone who's not their legal parent, but it's somebody who's intentionally taking the place of their parent and is responsible for their day-to-day care. That person can receive TANF on behalf of the child, even if they don't have legal guardianship paperwork in place. And so what DSHS, they'll notify the legal parents and they do complete a background check, but then that person acting in loco parentis can receive TANF on behalf of the child. And then next, legal guardians, of course, with their legal paperwork, they can receive TANF on behalf of the child. There's also something called child-only TANF, and that's when you have parents who are not eligible for TANF for some reason that's not income. So they qualify based on their income, but there's some other reason that makes them ineligible. What we see most often at Solid Ground is the immigration status. Like Patty was speaking about earlier, you have to be a US citizen to be eligible. And so in these cases, the children can receive TANF by themselves. And also we have relatives of a certain degree that are caring for a minor child in their home. So we listed some out here, like siblings, nephews, nieces, aunts, grandparents, cousins. They can also receive TANF on behalf of the child. And next, this is an important TANF provision to keep in mind. So if someone is approved for TANF, they must cooperate in setting up or allowing the Department of Child Support to enforce its child support orders. So they have to cooperate with that process if they're entitled to receive child support. But there is a good cause exception if it's not safe for them to cooperate or to help DCS. So the standard is if cooperating with the Department of Child Services would result in serious physical or emotional harm to you or your child, in those cases you can be exempt. And so we've listed that standard there, that comes up. And just another thing to note, if somebody is receiving TANF and they're not getting child support, but then later on they start receiving child support, that child support might be reduced to repay the state for some of the TANF received. So that's something that we want to keep in mind. Next, tribal TANF. There's about 10 tribes in Washington state, and they administer their own TANF programs. And the tribes have flexibility to design and their own TANF programs. So this is pretty interesting if you have a situation like this. So it's also provides cash aid and services to needy American Indians and Alaska Native families, and funded directly by the tribes. And so the families that live within the tribe service area, they can apply for either the traditional state TANF through Washington state or through their tribe. And then we've added a link here to click and see which tribes participate and how to reach out specifically to that tribe if you have someone that wants to apply to that tribal TANF. So TANF, we mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. It has a 5-year lifetime limit. So when people are receiving TANF, after 60 months or 5 years, generally the TANF program would end. But what we listed here is the situations where there are exceptions. There's many exemptions, and we've listed a lot of the common exemptions here. So if you have an older caretaker relative, someone who's 55 or older, and they're caring for a child that's not their legal child, they're exempt from this 5-year rule. Or a person who's caring for an adult relative who has disabilities is exempt. A person caring for a child with special needs is exempt. Solid Ground has a client like this right now that we've been assisting. One of their children has special needs, and so they're not going to be subject to this 5-year lifetime limit of TANF. Finally, an adult with severe chronic disabilities as well. There's also extensions available. So you hit the end of the 5 years, but you can get a little bit more time on TANF if you have a hardship. So you need to show that you're working at least 32 hours a week, or that you're a survivor of family violence. There's extensions for people who are working with child welfare issues involving their children, or for people who are unhoused. Unfortunately, there was one main exception that's extension that has ended as of last June. There was an extension that a lot of people were receiving that were impacted during the pandemic, during COVID, and that's unfortunately ending. So these extensions that we were talking about earlier to the 60-month of TANF, oftentimes they're called TLEs, or time limit extensions. And so again, the COVID-19 TLE is over now. That's no longer available. But like we said earlier, there's exemptions. So for people like our client who's caring for a disabled child, they're not subject to that 60-month time limit. And then there's extensions, like where people can get an additional few months of TANF in different situations. And DSHS does screen households for these types of extensions and TLEs. I think in the last month or two of their 60 months of TANF, they'll screen them. But of course, we recommend that when you're working with someone who's nearing that 5 years, start talking with them to see if they may be eligible for some of these extensions. And this is something that you could reach out to ask a lawyer about as well, and we could send you the statutes or talk it through with you to see if it's likely that the person might be eligible for an extension or is eligible for an exemption from that 5-year rule. And then a little bit more on exceptions. So other situations of time that's not counted toward that 60-month limit, that's when you have a relative other than a parent caring for a child and receiving TANF, an unemancipated pregnant or parenting minor who's living in DSHS approved living arrangements, sometimes an adult living on a tribal reservation where 50% of the adults living there are not employed, or sometimes this child-only TANF that I talked about earlier, where the parent is ineligible, often because of immigration status, but the child is receiving. In that case, they can continue on beyond the 60 months as well. And this high unemployment rate time limit extension also exists. If you have questions about this, if you think someone's living in an area or during a time where there was high unemployment, we can help you research this a little bit further. This is the common one that comes up. During April of 2020, there was a high rate of unemployment. And so if you're working with someone who's been receiving TANF for all 5 years, but they did live in a place where there was high unemployment during May, July, August of 2020. Those 3 months had high unemployment, so DSHS can add back on an additional 3 months of TANF. So just another thing to keep in mind as you're talking with people when they're nearing that end of the 5 years, help them look to see if they might be eligible for any of these extensions. And then just some tips here. If the family is unhoused, they're eligible for exemptions and extensions, and we'll go more into that. If a family is not technically homeless, but they're struggling with housing instability, then they could be still a good candidate for a hardship exemption. And so in these cases, we've listed some examples here. We could help them provide proof of income with their application and just help them notify DSHS of the situation so that you can help them qualify for this type of an exception. Oh, and also, you as an advocate, you can go with the client to these types of TANF or WorkFirst meetings and help advocate on their behalf, explain their situation, their hardship, that they're unhoused, to help them qualify for these. And then we'll have a time for questions. We added a link here as well. This is from our partners with Poverty Action. And this is just a one-page summary of some of the new changes to TANF. And all of them we're reviewing today during our presentation, but if you just want to see a quick summary.
Awesome. Thank you, Patricia and Brittany. I saw a couple comments and no real questions in the chat, but if you are furiously typing, deciding whether you're going to type or come off mute, I'm going to share a little bit. So early on, we had a really great question about child support, and it says, would lawyers be able to help with child support or mostly just housing situations? And I think we did kind of get this answered. Brittany also answered it in the chat, but I'd like to get it included in the recording. So in terms of actually getting child support, not the role of the BLA attorneys. However, as Brittany went over, certainly child support can impact TANF benefits. So there was a slide on that, but Brittany, Patricia, I want you to, if you want to expand on that at all.
That's right. So it is sometimes connected. So our main focus with the benefit legal assistance team is with Washington state benefits. So like TANF, if you have someone applying for TANF who's been denied from TANF, those are the types of questions that you can absolutely reach out. But child support does have that connection that we went through where when a person is approved for TANF, they do have to cooperate with child support. And unless they have a very specific reason. So if you have something like that coming up, we could definitely help you determine and help you explain to DSHS why that person may not be able to cooperate to help them get an exception from that.
Wonderful. We've had some folks join after into the presentation a little bit, so I will just take the opportunity to let everybody know we are recording this. This video will get posted probably later today on our YouTube channel, and then we will send out the slides, all of these links that are being thrown into the chat, and the video recording into a blog, and you will all get that email next week with all those links. And even if some of your colleagues registered but weren't able to attend today, they will also get that. So it's kind of the way we encourage folks to register, even if they think they can't make it for that very reason. It's a quick and easy way to get the information. So Tim, thank you for throwing in that link to the one pager in the chat so folks can look at that right now. April is a social worker that works at Benefits Legal Assistance, and she's been throwing in some of the legislative links and work that's happening at the state level around TANF. And I do not know the exact agenda for the power advocacy power half hour, but I suspect these are things that Hallie will be talking about. So get that percolating in your brain. And then I'm also going to take a moment to just say, I will be logging off of this Zoom meeting right around the 10 o'clock hour. We at the coalition feel like we've problem solved the issue where I am not going to kick everyone out of this Zoom training. I am logged in just as a guest, like many of you, and we hope that that won't affect it. But if for some reason right around 10 o'clock you get kicked off, go right back to your Zoom link and join back on. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Hopefully it won't happen. Okay. I'm not seeing anything else. I'm not seeing hands. Tim, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, just really quickly, if anybody does have trouble rejoining at any point, we've had issues with our Zoom lately. I just want to put my email in the chat. You're welcome to email me and we can troubleshoot together and get you back in the meeting.
And it looks like
we have one more question.
Yeah, take it away.
Mohammed asks, if the client needs for daycare for her kid, where should I go and ask for help? This could be a good resource sharing moment. Anybody have ideas for Mohammed?
Thanks. Yeah, there is a program, connections program through DCYF. So I'll search for that and see if I can get some information in the chat about that. And if others have resources, please feel free to share.
Yeah, we are a room full of knowledge here, including presenters as well as audience members. We all do important work and we all carry resources with us. So any resources we want to share in the chat at any point, folks are welcome to.
If there's no other...
Can I ask a quick question? Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
So, and looking at, do clients go off and on TANF? Like, say somebody gets a job and then they don't qualify and then lose the job. Does it, or is it for that full period of time? Or does it stop and then restart again?
So it's very individual to each client. Usually, if they are starting a job and maybe lose that job, it does stop and start along with eligibility. So I think it was in the previous slide, it does say, so if your client, for example, loses their job or stops working, for example, you'd need to fill out a stop work form. That is kind of playing into that. So if you get a new job and you are no longer financially qualified and none of the exemptions apply, you would come off of TANF. If you lose that job for some reason or any of your other qualifying reasons change, you can go back on. The 60-month or the 5-year does not have to be a straight stretch. It's during your lifetime. So you might use 3 months, come off of it, and then 2 years later, need it again for 12 months. That is totally fine. That is totally normal. And they would just look at what months you were receiving that benefit.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure. Unless there's any other questions, I will continue on. And apologies for losing the PowerPoint there for a second. My cord to my second screen decided that it would be a great time to disconnect. But we're back, so it's fine. So moving along, to qualify for TANF, it does require that you participate in what's called WorkFirst. So this means that recipients are either searching for, maintaining employment, or engaging in community services. Most TANF recipients are required to participate in employment or job search, or have to go through education or job training for about 30 to 40 hours a week. However, to determine what that looks like for each person, clients sign what is called an IRP, an individual responsibility plan, which outlines what their specific requirements are to comply with the program and therefore get the benefits. To set up this IRP, each TANF recipient does have to attend a WorkFirst orientation where they look at everything in your life and determine what that IRP should look like, what makes sense for you. So for example, some people, it might be applying to 6 jobs a week. It might be attending high school if you are a teen or young adult. It might be going to job orientations, doing a certain number of interviews. It is completely customized to the individual. So just because one person's IRP says something doesn't mean yours would be the same. It is individualized. The only 100% common requirement is that you have to attend that orientation. So there are some exemptions to the WorkFirst program. So these are, if you have a very young child, so under the age of 1, you do not have to participate in actively looking for work. So there is a time requirement on that, and it is kind of in the weeds. If you have a client with that, we're happy to talk over the specifics. Another example is if you're 55 years or older and you're caring for someone else's child, you also don't have to be actively looking for alternative employment. Additionally, if you are severely or chronically disabled, if you care for a special needs child, or you care for a relative with a disability. Now, those distinctions do have to be certified by a doctor, and you do need a doctor to say that that special needs child or that relative with a disability could not be left alone at home for more than 10 hours a week. And as long as that is stated by a professional, you are able to have an exemption from the requirement to try and find employment. There is one new exemption as well. It's called the hardship exemption. We're going to go into detail on the next slide. It is a little bit open-ended. So DSHS has included a new exemption called their hardship exemption. And it outlines some examples of life events that can occur that exempt you from having to try and find employment. However, it's not a cut and dry case as with the previous examples. You know, if you're 57 and you're caring for a child that's not your own, that's a check mark on the age, check mark on the child, you qualify. It's very black and white. These are case by case determined for the hardship exemptions. So because of that, we're happy to talk over cases and help you kind of frame them in a way that articulates how you would qualify if need be. But some of the examples are if you've experienced a personal trauma. So if you've had a death in the family or a severe accident that would limit your ability to be employed. If you have a digital divide, so if you live somewhere that is, for example, like an internet desert, and that would impact your ability to either look for jobs or hold down a job, might qualify. If you have housing instability, so either you are unhoused, you have temporary but not stable housing, or you have somewhere to stay, but it doesn't include access to like necessary facilities like a laundry, which would be a requirement to hold down a job, being able to launder clothes and take care of personal hygiene. Another example would be health-related challenges, such as a temporary disability, or if you have a legal obligation. So if you are on probation and there are certain requirements for that, or if there are court-ordered appointments that would impact your ability to apply for or maintain a job, all of those can be articulated to DSHS as a request for a hardship exemption. They will look over everything presented to them and they'll let you know if you qualify. So jumping into more examples of the IRP, the Individual Responsibility Plan. This is basically a contract. You are sitting down with them and coming up with an agreement. You are saying, I will do X, Y, and Z, say apply to 6 jobs, go to X number of interviews, obviously if they're offered, or maintain full-time, going to high school, for example. Whatever it says on the IRP, you are stating that you agree to do this in exchange for qualifying for this program. So if you don't meet those requirements, you can lose your benefits. You can't, it is a negotiation, so you can explain to them why, for example, applying to 30 jobs is unreasonable. They'll come back with their counter. It's a conversation, but once it is agreed and signed to by both parties, it is a contract. So you need to make sure that whatever is on there is something you reasonably believe that you can live up to. Otherwise, you are at risk of losing those benefits. So as a part of the process to get your individual plan, you do go through a comprehensive evaluation. The client and a caseworker sign the IRP when it's first written, but it can be changed as well. So they will look through your background, your experiences, and if that changes, you can have the IRP altered. It just has to be done in writing. In addition, as part of that, you can get assistance. So if you are applying to jobs, for example, and you're not getting callbacks, they might enroll you in a resume writing class to give you some additional skills to assist you with getting results from those applications. And they do have to consider your needs and wants in that negotiation as well. So if you've gone to writing classes before and you don't think that's necessary, you can voice that. Both of them have to agree to whatever this IRP is, put it in writing, sign it, and then like I said, if there are alterations, again, you put those changes in writing and sign it as well. So this is just an example of what an IRP could look like. Hopefully it's legible. If not, you can also view it on the slides that have been sent out. So this will explain there are examples of what needs to be done by the client in order to get services. And then it does clearly state what happens if they are missed, if those requirements are missed. And it also says what are some reasonable things to mention if you know you're going to miss it. So for example, if you have a job application or a job interview lined up and then you experience an emergency, it tells you how to let them know so that they don't count that against you. So it's all spelled out in those IRPs. But again, this is just an example. Every single one is individualized. So please don't look at this and think that this is what yours or your clients would look like exactly, but it's just a general example to look off. This also is an example of what support services might look like that are on the IRP. So it says in there other things that might be necessary for you to receive in order to complete your IRP. So if you are needing transportation to get to job interviews, if you are needing counseling to help with mental health in order to be able to participate in those job interviews, for example, either to look for a job, keep a job, accept a job, etc. It'll be spelled out in there what those necessary additions are, and it'll be put in there. So some examples on here: car repairs, diapers, bus passes. It can be really anything that can be a burden or a barrier to being able to gain or maintain employment. So next we have WorkFirst support services. So there are a lot of services available, kind of like I described, that can help with those barriers that might be in place that would keep you from maintaining or gaining employment. It could be childcare subsidies. It could be gaining the uniform or work clothes necessary to get or maintain a job, personal hygiene or haircut services, transportation assistance, that could be either gas cards or bus passes. Educational expenses, you know, some jobs require certifications or licenses in order to start employment there. You can get assistance with gaining those. If you have a vehicle, but it's not necessarily operational, or it needs some sort of maintenance, like an oil change in order to be safe, those can be a part of it as well. If there's tools or equipment that you need for your job that you can't afford, but that are needed for the job and not supplied by your employer, union fees, relocation expenses sometimes. So if it's a great job, but it's just not feasibly within commuting distance, you might be able to move to that area, and housing and utility assistance potentially. And there are resources on the side that have examples and then links to programs that you are welcome to utilize. And if you know of more, please share them in the chat as well. We are always looking for additional resources to share with our own clients and just the community at large. Other potential support services, there is an earned income tax credit. The hotline number is right there on the screen. And you can claim this credit for years that you have missed. So if you're just now learning about it, or your client is just now learning about it, and they realize, oh my gosh, I have never utilized that, and I've had a child for X number of years, you can go back and retroactively claim that credit. So it can give you back some money into your pocket to help you. There is also food assistance through Transitional Food Assistance, TFA. It's a program that provides food benefits for up to 5 months for families that are leaving workforce cash assistance. So this is not the same as your other food assistance programs. It's an addition. So just because you're getting other assistance does not mean you wouldn't qualify for this as well. So we have just a few tips for WorkFirst as well. Read through the IRP thoroughly and make sure that it works for you. Like I said, this is a contract. So you do need to make sure that whatever is in there is something you can reasonably comply with. You don't want to sign it kind of out of desperation because of where you're at right now, and then realize that in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, you're not able to actually live up to that agreement, because then you could be seen as non-complying and lose your benefits. It's better to negotiate something that really does look like something you can comply with. And as a part of that, we do recommend that if you're able to, that the advocates attend those meetings with their clients. It can be really hard to self-advocate in those meetings. It can be really intimidating. Having somebody with you that can either advocate for you or just be a good presence there to help you advocate for yourself is really beneficial. In addition, if a client is homeless, they don't have to engage in a job search if they're conducting other activities on their IRP that are looking for housing. You can't be expected to be trying to find housing and hold down a job or look for a job at the same time. It's unreasonable. And thankfully, that is recognized. In addition, if a client has a health problem, they don't have to engage in a job search if they're conducting activities identified in the IRP that would help with their current health issues. So if you're experiencing a health emergency and you need to get your health under control or to a stable place in order to look for or hold down a job, that can be a very reasonable IRP requirement that's in there in lieu of looking for employment. Only once you have that in a healthier, controlled level, then you can start looking for employment. There are other reasons why people would be able to engage in would not be able to engage in job searches. There is a WAC, it's on the screen. You're welcome to look through it. It has a full list of examples of reasons that can be given or included in an IRP that are not job search specific. but that can be included in there to still qualify for WorkFirst. And they can still use WorkFirst support systems as well and services. So a few more tips. A reminder that the new good cause exemptions exist. So like I said, if you have a temporary emergency, if you have housing instability, any of those examples we went through a few slides ago, those are great examples to bring up to ask for either a modification for your IRP or to include in your initial negotiation if that's occurring at the same time. When you're working with clients that are unhoused, the goal of the IRP can be to conduct housing related activities to establish housing. So like I said, it's important that you have somewhere safe to live before you engage in trying to find a job. And that is recognized, and a very valid inclusion in an IRP is first getting and maintaining housing stability, then pursuing employment. And through all of that, as long as it's in that IRP, it counts as your WorkFirst requirement, and you do qualify for TANF from that requirement. So here are some examples of what that might look like. So it might be meeting with a housing stability case manager, looking at shelters, meeting with a DV advocate, obtaining documents needed for applying for housing, attending counseling sessions. Those are all things that can be metrics in your IRP that can qualify for you to comply with WorkFirst. So now that I have dumped all of WorkFirst on you, we want to take a minute for questions to see if anyone has questions. And I will mute to allow those to be read.
Okay, so I haven't seen a ton of questions, but there was a lot of resources that got thrown into the chat. So thank you for that. We had one person that needed to leave, but major kudos to you all for this amazing training. I am going to take the opportunity while you all are formulating questions, chatting or typing into the chat to say my deep thanks to Patricia and Brittany and April for being here today, partnering with us, sharing this amazing information. I am going to leave this meeting now, so I seriously hope I don't end it for everybody, but enjoy the rest of the training, the advocacy power half hour, and hopefully we'll see you next time. So Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you at this point. Bye, folks.
Thanks so much, Jody. All right, she's left and the meeting hasn't ended. That's a good sign. We just got a great question in the chat that I'm going to read aloud. This is not a WorkFirst specific question, but I was wondering if a client has no income, is pregnant, and homeless, do they automatically qualify for TANF, or is there other additional criteria they need to meet?
So I don't want to use automatically qualify. It does sound like they would be a really good candidate to apply. Just based on the information provided, it does kind of trigger for me to ask what, for example, their citizenship status is. That is a requirement. What their age is to know if they would qualify or someone would qualify on their behalf. And there might be other questions to ask as well, like, is this teenager a high school student? Have they dropped out? Are they still enrolled? They probably qualify, but I couldn't say it definitively. But they should apply. And if they qualify, their WorkFirst plan would very much take into consideration the fact that they're pregnant, the fact that they're a teenager, the fact that they're unhoused. So they wouldn't probably be put in a system where they have to go find employment right this minute. For example, there's other mitigating factors that we should be taking into account first.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Patty.
Hey, Patricia and Brittany, I have a question. First of all, thank you both so much for all this really helpful information. I'm curious with WorkFirst, does it require any sort of weekly, like, electronic internet login to record what you've done that week? I would assume that folks who are experiencing homelessness would have a hard time accessing a computer. And I do know that for unemployment, they do have like pretty strict requirements on your tracking of the things that you're doing. So I'm wondering how strict that is for the IRP. And then question. For the IRP, if you are neglecting it, would they require repayment of your TANF benefits? Have you seen that with like requiring back pay from previous payments?
Yeah, so those are both great questions. So for the first one, oh my gosh, my entire brain just shut off. Can you repeat the first one? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So basically, I was just wondering what the requirements are for
check-in.
yeah, like showing that you are doing your IRP, basically.
Sorry. As soon as I started talking, I started thinking about the second question, and my brain just checked out.
That's on me for asking too many questions at once.
No, so it very much depends on your IRP. If you are unhoused, if you are in one of those like digital deserts, like I was talking about, that would all be addressed and written into your IRP. If you have access to internet, your check-ins might be more frequent, or they might be completely virtual. If you are part of a digital desert or you are unhoused, those check-ins could be in person instead. They could be less frequent to accommodate you. And it really does depend on what those check-ins are. If it's that a teenager has to engage in high school, I don't see a reason why they'd have to check in every week and say, I'm still in high school. Versus if your requirement is to do a certain number of applications every week, that might be a more reasonable requirement. So it's very individual based, but that would be a kind of barrier to bring up during that IRP process so that you can negotiate a plan that you can comply with. And then Brittany, I see you're off mute. Do you want to do question 2?
Sure, yeah. Well, also just to add a little bit to question 1, I totally agree. I think it's something to go through during the IRP meeting and make sure that the person is explaining what their needs are. But we have a client right now that we're working with, and on her IRP, she has to take ESL classes, and she's completing those through REWA. And in her situation, REWA is actually notifying DSHS directly. So just like Patty said, I think that was worked out in the IRP as well. So yeah, each one can be a good option. And for the next question, as far as repayment, that we're not talking about that very much today in our presentation, but it can come up if a person received TANF funds that they were not eligible for. I've seen people where they had an inadvertent error. They didn't include a person in their family that they should have in their home, or didn't include income correctly, and so it can happen. DSHS will indicate that there's been an overpayment and ask the person to pay back that portion of the overpayment. And if that's done in error, of course, there's a process for requesting a hearing and appealing that. And that's something absolutely you should refer to us and we can help with. There's also a sanction process, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. Just if somebody they are eligible, but they're not meeting the requirements in that IRP. And so that's a perfect segue. That's the next section that we're going to go through.
Thank you both. Sorry to hog the question space. Just a quick one. So it sounds like with having an IRP, it would require a lot of meetings to initiate the TANF benefits. Do you know how long the application process typically takes folks before they actually see payments?
Trying to think of the last one I did. Maybe April will pop in as well. I think it's oh no, so 45 day is the max that DSHS can take. Is that right, Patty? But I think we often see it take just a few weeks to get through that process, maybe about a month.
And that IRP plan, it can be just one meeting. It usually is. It's not like a repeated over and over process. Usually you'll meet with the DSHS caseworker, you'll go through all of your needs and you kind of negotiate and nail it down all in one meeting. Obviously, that's not always the case if the client's there by themselves and they want it to be reviewed by a caseworker or an attorney before they sign it. That's reasonable, but usually it's a very quick process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the great questions, Kristen. Those are definitely going to be reflected in the blog. We love being very transparent about what the experience is like for a person accessing these benefits. So that's really good. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but just an open invitation. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll get them answered. I do want to take just one moment for anybody who has any feedback for this training. We do really care about what you think. We want these trainings to be valuable to you. I'm just going to put our post-training survey in the chat. It takes about 2 minutes. Feel free to be completely honest so that our next training ideally is just as valuable, if not more valuable.
Thank you so much, and thanks for listing that in the chat, Tim. So next we're going to talk about sanctions. Kind of has to do with Kristen's question a little bit. If something is going wrong, a sanction is as you know, a penalty or a punishment, and this lowers the amount of TANF that a person receives. So DSHS can sanction a person. They can stop the TANF altogether if they decide that a person refused without a good reason to follow their IRP or to meet some other WorkFirst requirement. And if a person does receive a sanction, it's important to know that the medical assistance coverage doesn't change. That's not impacted. That will still continue, even if there is a sanction. And so we'll go through the process, but just to mention, oftentimes in reality, us at Solid Ground, we find out about a sanction after it's already happened, after it's already been put in place. And as you can imagine, it happens a lot. A person may move a few times, they may be unhoused, and so they're not receiving that communication from DSHS saying, hey, you have this issue you need to correct, or you didn't communicate with us, didn't complete something in your IRP. And so a lot of times, by the time we see someone, it's already in place. And that's okay. You can still cure it and fix it, and we'll go through that. But if you do come across someone and they just say, oh, I have a sanction in place, I just found out, tell them to request a hearing. Do that first, because there may be a legal reason that DSHS shouldn't have put that sanction in place. So if you find out about a hearing, ask for, if you find out about a sanction, ask for a hearing right away. So the sanction process, this is the DSHS lowers the person's grant by whatever's more, one person's share of TANF in the family, or 40% of the entire family's TANF grant. So whatever's more, that's what they're going to lower it. And the sanction goes into place if a person hasn't met the WorkFirst requirements for 2 months. So they have some time to try to fix it, but once 2 months have gone by with the issue in place, then they would receive the sanction. After a person is in sanction status for 12 months, DSHS will stop the TANF grant. So that means it ends up being 10 months of reductions because they received for 2 months, but they haven't complied. So then for the next 10, or after 10 more months, it's stopped. And DSHS should let people cure their sanction or fix it and get out of the sanction status. And so the normal process is that they do send letters and they schedule meetings before they start a sanction. But like I said, sometimes that just isn't received by the person, so they're not aware. So the sanction process, this is their standard process. So if the person is receiving mail and in communication with DSHS, this is how it would go. So first, the department would send a letter telling the person, what they failed to do. And they tell the client that they can contact DSHS in 10 days and explain what happened and why they didn't comply. And then after that, the department will schedule a case staffing meeting. And that's where DSHS will talk with the person to see if there was a good reason for not doing what they were supposed to do. And they're supposed to screen that person at that time for issues like family violence, other barriers. And so this would be another good opportunity if you're able to attend, if you're helping somebody in the community, and you can attend this meeting with them to help them express what's going on and why they weren't able to meet those requirements, what happened. After the case staffing meeting, then the department decides if there was a good reason for not following the IRP. If there was a good reason, then they won't sanction. If not a good reason, then they'll put that sanction in place. So the law says that the department must send a letter at least 10 days before the sanction starts, explain the situation, explain how to fix it, and include appeal information. And generally, we do recommend appealing these. And then after 10 days, if no response, or if they determine that the reason isn't a good reason, then DSHS will lower that TANF grant. Why are people sanctioned? This is a TANF sanction. They're sanctioned because the department decides that the person failed or refused without a good reason to do one of these things. So usually give the case manager information that was needed to make or update the IRP, or go to appointments that were listed on the IRP, show that they're doing their best to do everything in the IRP. That one sounds a little paternalistic, but what it means is the person is, if they have a reason, like something happened with their vehicle and it broke and they weren't able to get to their employment, they would show DSHS, like let them know, I couldn't get to my appointment that's listed on my IRP because my vehicle broke. So that shows that they're doing their best to meet the requirement, but they couldn't because of the car. So that's what that's talking about. So just maintaining that communication with the department. Or they could be sanctioned if they take a job that complies with labor laws and and doesn't have unreasonable working conditions, hours, or demands. So these in these types of situations, basically it's like failing or refusing to meet these requirements without a good reason. So we'll talk a little bit more about that good reason next.
And I think we might have a typo on this slide. It should say that if you refuse to take a job that is legally compliant, that would be seen as a violation. So
Thank you. I was wondering if I read that.
So just to clarify, you're required to take a job if it's offered to you, as long as it is legal and meets these other qualifications. And if you refuse to do that after being offered the job, that could be seen as a sanctionable offense.
So we reviewed that a person is sanctioned if they failed or refused without good reason to follow the WorkFirst requirements. And so here the slide talks about what types of situations are considered good reasons by DSHS. So we'll go through these situations. If you're working with someone in the community facing these issues, absolutely they need to bring it to DSHS's attention so that they can explain that they had a good reason. And so if the person has a serious physical, mental, or emotional condition that interfered with their ability to follow their IRP, or they were threatened, or family violence was going on, if the department didn't send a notice telling what information they needed, or letting the person know about an appointment that was missed, if the person wasn't able to find affordable, appropriate childcare within a reasonable distance, or even care for an incapacitated person that may be living with them. That's a similar reason. Like I mentioned earlier, transportation broke down, childcare arrangements broke down and couldn't make new ones in time. There was an immediate legal problem, like an eviction that had to be dealt with. Or or the person should have been receiving equal access services, but the department didn't make this designation or failed to follow through on an accommodation plan. So there's good reasons that could allow a person not to be sanctioned. So again, to avoid sanctions, call the DSHS worker on the number on the IRP. So that IRP contract that Patty showed earlier has a worker sign it, and the person also signs it. So you have the contact information, reach out to that person, let them know the situation that occurred, why you were unable to comply. Explain what happened. Your car broke, you had to move suddenly, you lost the childcare provider. And oftentimes trying to reach these caseworkers can be difficult. And so we recommend leaving a message and making a note of your own, the date that you called, the information that you conveyed in your message. This could become important if you end up requesting a hearing, to have a detailed idea that you did reach out and communicate the information to DSHS. And again, DSHS schedules meetings before applying the sanction. If somebody is aware of this meeting, then absolutely they should attend, and you can attend with community members that you're assisting attend these meetings to advocate for them. There's also this July reset. So if a person's TANF was closed out due to a sanction, but it happened before July 1st of 2021, and if the person is now reapplying, Patty talked about earlier that a person may be on TANF and then not for a while, and then they might jump back in and join TANF again. So if they were closed out because of a sanction before July 1st, 2021, the case reopens not in sanction status. But otherwise, if they were a person with on TANF closed out because of a sanction, and then they reopen if it happened after July 2021, then they have to take part in a work activity for 4 weeks before they can get TANF again. If your case was closed out for another reason while you were in sanction status, it reopens, but at that reduced grant level. And so there's an example here at the bottom. If your case closed while you were in month 4 of your reduction sanction, your grant will be opened in month 5 of grant reduction sanction status. And we'll go into questions.
All right, I'm not currently seeing any questions in the chat, but we are here to answer questions that come up organically. Know that if you speak aloud, you're going to be captured on the chat, but if you just post something in the chat, I can read that aloud and you can stay anonymous.
I was just looking at my notes, and I think I forgot to mention one piece about just curing these sanctions. So most commonly, if someone is sanctioned for not following their IRP, to get out of that sanction status, they have to follow the IRP for 4 weeks in a row, and then DSHS will take away the sanction. But if a person is sanctioned because they didn't provide information to DSHS, like they didn't provide a paperwork saying that they had attended a specific training, as soon as they provide the paperwork, the sanction's lifted. So that's kind of the difference. If it's been a compliance issue that you're not doing, you need to do it for a full month, then you're out. If it's just providing information, provide it, and sanctions cured.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'll continue unless any have popped in. Also, so we're not just sitting here listening to some fun dead air. But if you think of any, please continue to put them in the chat. We will have another question portion at the end of this, and we'll go over all the questions you guys have before handing it over. So there is a program called the Working Connections Childcare Program. This program can help families with children pay for childcare. It's a subsidy that is paid directly to the provider of childcare themselves. The child receiving care must be a citizen or a legal resident. However, the parent or guardian of that child does not need to be a citizen or legal resident, because it is being paid on the child's behalf to the provider. And there are 2 types of WCCCs. The first is the WorkFirst families for approved activities. This can include for employment or school or job training. So this is childcare specifically for the adult to engage in those activities. And that can be for applying for jobs, going through job training. If you're a high schooler, for example, it can be while you're in school, or if you get a job, it can be while you're employed. The second type is working families with income at or below 60% of the state median income, or 65% of the SMI when you are reapplying. So it goes up slightly. So even if you are looking for childcare beyond those activities, you might be eligible based on your income. And you can look up your state median income. Quite honestly, we just Google it. And it is published by each state. Obviously, here you'd be looking for Washington median income. They calculate it every single year. You do not want to look for city median income, that is separate, or county, that is separate. It'll just be Washington state median income. And there should be a 60% mark, or you can do the math yourself. Or if you're reapplying, like I said, 65%. Families participating in this do have to pay a copay directly to the provider, but it can be as low as $0. So you are, it's like going to the doctor, you pay a copay, but your copay amount might be $0. And it cannot exceed $250 or $15 a month. So even if that child care costs $2,000, you cannot be held liable for anything more than $215 if it's a part of this program. But for example, if you have no income, you're participating in the program, your copay might be $0. And it's individually based on their calculations. So this is new. As of November of 2023, there is an additional subsidy, and you automatically qualify for this if you have a child under the age of 3 in your application. So if it's a child only, then it automatically applies. If the child's under 3, if you and your child are applying and the child's under 3, it's called a diaper subsidy. It's supposed to make up for the costs associated with young children, like diapers, like wipes, things like that. However, there is no requirement that you actually spend the money on that. So if you are cloth diapering, and so you aren't spending $100 a month on diapers, that is totally fine. If you potty train your child under the age of 3 and you don't need that money for specifically diapers, you're not saving receipts, you're not turning those into DSHS. They are not allowed to ask you for those receipts. It is just automatically provided to you to make up for the implied cost of those things. So that will automatically go onto your subsidy each month. If you think you should qualify for that, you don't see it, you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen there be an issue. That being said, it's only been around for 4 months. So if you think you should qualify and you don't see it on there, please reach out. But you should be getting that subsidy automatically added to your payment. So there's also an emergency cash assistance program for TANF families, and it is called AREN, Additional Requirements for Emergency Needs. You do have to have an emergent need that comes up that you couldn't really have foreseen. And you need it to either keep your housing, keep your utilities, or have a good reason for that need. And the maximum amount you can get for that is $750. And you can only apply for it once within a 12-month period. Well, you can only receive it once within a 12-month period. So if you received it 6 months ago, you can't ask for it again for 6 more months, for example. And it's not calendar months, it is rolling months. In some cases, you can receive more than that $750 if it's related to a health or safety issue, but that is rare and very case specific. Diversion, alternative assistance for families who have a short-term need and do not wish to receive TANF. So if you otherwise would not be qualified for TANF, or you think, I'm experiencing a need this month because I got laid off, but I'm starting a new job next month, for example, and you really just need help with this month, you can get additional assistance for a temporary period of time like that month. The maximum amount that can be paid out is $1,250, and you must repay a prorated portion of it if you're on TANF before 1 year. So if you get this additional assistance, you end up being on TANF later within a year of that, you might need to pay some of it back, but it's rare. There's also CEAP, Consolidated Emergency Assistance Program. It's a cash program available to families or pregnant individuals who face an emergency and do not have the money to meet their basic needs. This, including families whose TANF cash assistance has been terminated in sanctions, and for those who have already received 60 months of TANF and don't have another extension. So this assistance is limited to no more than 30 consecutive days within a period of 12 consecutive months. So if you've already used TANF, if you don't qualify for TANF, but you have something come up, that could be housing instability, that could be a loss of a job, that could be an injury or illness that impacts your ability to meet your own basic needs, you can apply for this emergency assistance program. Again, though, you can't get assistance for more than 30 days within a 12-month rolling period. So what to report to DSHS? An approval letter should clearly state what needs to be reported between reviews and how to report it. If you move or someone, including your child, moves out of your house, you need to let DSHS know as soon as possible. That being said, if it happens on a temporary basis, especially if it is not your own choice, such as the child being taken out by CPS, that would be an exemption. We'll go over that in the next slide. But if voluntarily or for an extended period of time, somebody moves out, say you and your partner and your child all lived together, we're all on TANF, and then you and your partner break up and that partner moves out, you need to report that to TANF because that would change your household size. Instead of being a 3-person household, you'd be a 2-person household, for example. Or if your total gross monthly income changes. So if you get a job and you are bringing in more than the subsidy amount, you need to let them know so that they can recalculate to see if you qualify for TANF or to see if your payment changes. Additionally, child support does count as an unearned income. So if your child support changes, you need to let them know as well. If you have liquid resources over that now $12,000 resource limit, you need to let them know. Our advice is to really try and keep it under that, even though obviously the inclination is to save your money. If you go even a penny over that $12,000, you can lose your benefits, at least your TANF benefits, because you're over your resource limit. So keep an eye on those resources that you have available to make sure that you're still in compliance. And if you do go over it, let them know. Otherwise, they might continue to pay you and you might be forced to repay them back. Additionally, if you have a change in employment or approved work activity, so if you have a job, but the hours at that job change, or you're shifted from one type of employment to another that maybe you can't comply with, let DSHS know so that they can recalculate if needed. And by report, we mean call DSHS, and their number is on the screen. And keep track of, I know Brittany said this, but we can't say it enough, keep track of every time that you contact or attempt to contact them. If it ever becomes an issue, if you ever need to go to court, if it's ever he said, she said, it is so incredibly useful to have a detailed record of when and how you contacted DSHS. And if you do speak with someone, try and get their name as well, just for your own notes, so that if there's ever any issue, you have something to back up what you're saying. And we say that for the client and for any community support services as well. We keep track of everything every time we call DSHS as well. So when to reopen or when to report to DSHS, you need to report changes by the 10th day of the month following the change. So say January 1st, you had a change of circumstances. You broke up with your partner and they moved out of the house. You need to let DSHS know by the 10th of February. So the 10th day of the following month. After that, it's considered that you have breached it. You've waited too long. So you could have to pay back any benefits, or you could be put on sanctions, etc. For change of income, the date a change happens is the date you receive income based on that change. So if you're at work and you're told you are getting a raise in 90 days, you don't have to let the SHS know until you actually get a paycheck at that new higher wage amount. So you have 90 days plus however long it takes for you to get your first check. Obviously, you can let them know in advance, just make it very clear that this is a future implementation, not immediate, but you're not required to until you get that first check. Your household, for households receiving TANF or SFA, if a child in your assistance will be gone from your house longer than 180 days, you must report within 5 days of this change. So that's the example that I was talking about before. If, for example, your child is taken out of your custody by CPS and there's an investigation, but CPS is contacted and they say, our assumption is that the child will be put back into their home in 90 days or 120 days, whatever it is, less than 180. You don't have to let DSHS know. That is a temporary change. And in that instance, you could actually have dually eligible guardians for that child. So you as the parent, for example, who has had the child taken out of your household can continue to get benefits for that child for up to 180 days while they're temporarily living somewhere else. But if they're living with, say, grandma, who is taking care of them while you comply with some things with CPS, grandma could also apply for TANF and get TANF benefits for the child during that 180 days. Because it is temporary, that is completely allowed. That being said, you might have questions about that. If so, please reach out to us. And there are some kind of nuances to it, depending on who that secondary person is and whether you know if it's likely to be a temporary or longer term situation. But just to flag that, if you temporarily lose custody of a child, you don't have to let DSHS know. And like it says on here, if it is temporary, you can still receive TANF for both yourself and the child who is temporarily gone. Here's how to avoid some of those pitfalls. So we talked a lot about how to comply, but also how to, like, where the errors could come up that could kind of get you in trouble or a sticky situation. This is how to hopefully avoid that. So report those changes. Income changes, household changes, resource changes, ideally as quickly as possible. You won't get in trouble for reporting it early as long as you're clear, but you might get in trouble for reporting it late. So, and it is so easy to put it in your calendar as a to-do and to miss it by a day, 2 days, etc. Sorry about the siren. So report, and if you're not sure if it's something you need to report, you can either contact us or you can contact DSHS and ask. Say, you know, my child is going to live with their grandma for 90 days over the summer. Do I need to report this to you? The answer is no, but again, it's better to ask than to assume otherwise and then get in trouble with your benefits. And like it says on here, if in doubt, please contact either us or DSHS. We would rather you reach out to us and we get to tell you, nope, you're fine, than for you to assume that, unfortunately, incorrectly. And obviously comply with those program requirements. So whatever is on your IRP, comply as quickly and diligently as you can. And if you do not comply, if you do have something come up, communicate that as quickly as possible. Let them know what happened, provide them any sort of necessary proof if they need it, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're in trouble or in sanctions with them. Also, to do so, to comply with all of this, one really great resource is an equal access plan. It can be really hard to comply with the requirement of your IRP if, for example, that IRP is in 12-point font and you have poor vision and can't read it. Or if English is not your first language and it's provided to you in English. If it is using words that you can't cognitively process, so you don't know what it's saying. All of those things can be taken into consideration and can be altered so that you have everything in your power to comply with that IRP because of accommodations. So DSHS must provide necessary equal access plans to people with mental, neurological, physical, or sensory impairments that would impact or impair their ability to comply with the requirements for benefits. So if you need any of that, ask. And asking for those plans is something that we're able to assist with as necessary as well. So if you keep missing deadlines, for example, because none of the paperwork being sent to you is large enough for you to read, talk to us. We can help you get an equal access plan. And that is a reasonable accommodation to say, great, from now on, you need to give this to me in, for example, 24 size font so that I know when my deadlines are. And if then they're sending you paperwork that is not in compliance with that, and you're missing deadlines, the burden is on them rather than you, because they are the ones in violation of the equal access plan. Kind of in the same note as this, you can get a designated representative. So if you are, say, unhoused and so you don't have a safe or viable way to get mail, if you do have a cognitive disability or you're unable to read, for example, you can have somebody else get your mail so that they can read it to you, or to translate it for you into, words that are easier for you to comprehend. Or if you just need help remembering when those deadlines are, keeping track of your finances, keeping track of your calendar, you can get a designated representative. So what that means is it's either an individual or an organization that is authorized to act on your behalf in terms of eligibility purposes. So they can help you comply with deadlines, requirements, sending in paperwork, all of that. So if you think that would be something you'd benefit from, you can have a family member be a designated representative. It can be a social worker, it can be an organization, really anyone that you trust who is able to provide you that necessary assistance. Maybe in addition to an equal access plan, maybe instead of, it's very individual based, but it's a good additional resource to know about. So assuming you know all of this and something goes wrong, if benefits are denied, if your benefits are reduced, if you're put in sanctions, or if you're told that your benefits are terminated, request a hearing. There is a kind of default 90-day requirement to ask for a hearing. And so we don't want to accidentally miss that 90 days and then for you to, for example, reach out to DSHS or reach out to us for assistance. We'd rather right out the gate request a hearing, then contact us and ask for assistance. The screen, it says how to request a hearing. You can call or write to DSHS or the Office of Administrative Hearing. And you do have the right to be represented by an attorney. So you can call their customer service line. That number is on the screen, and the Office of Administrative Hearing, they have 2 phone numbers. They're both on the screen as well. I will be going past this fairly quickly, but this information again is in the PowerPoint that's emailed out to you. Like I was saying, there's a deadline for requesting a hearing. It is 90 days from the adverse action. So if you get in the mail a notification that you're being denied or terminated or having your benefits changed, it is 90 days from the time that that letter was issued. However, there are some exceptions. So if you've missed that, but there is a good exception to that. For example, we had a case where the letter got lost in the mail for more than 90 days. And there was the piece of paper itself was dated and signed, and the stamp from USPS was past the deadline to actually ask for a hearing. That is a great example of when that hearing deadline does not apply, because you are literally, it's impossible for you to have known and have taken the necessary action. So there are interesting one-offs that can occur that can give you an ability to go past that 90 days, but within your ability to do so, apply for that hearing within that 90 days, save yourself the headache. While you are in that period, while you are pending a hearing, you will continue to get benefits. So while you're waiting to go in front of a judge, while you're hopefully meeting with an attorney, getting your paperwork together, coming up with your argument, you're not doing that on top of having just lost this big resource that is allowing you to maintain your household. So that is good. So
Okay, if I just jump in too for a second, just to clarify. So then to get those continuing benefits, I think that's what you're just about to say too. You have to make sure to request the hearing within 10 days of the adverse action. So a little quicker. So there's 90-day requirement to request a hearing, but you got to do it in 10 days to have that continued benefit.
And again, there are those exceptions that apply. For example, if you don't get the paperwork within 10 days, obviously you can't do that. But if you've gotten that letter 3 months ago and you're holding on to it and then you apply, you wouldn't be able to get that benefit. So as quickly as possible, contact them. If you contact them and it's outside that 10 days for a reason that's beyond your control, contact us. We're happy to help you make that argument. Because like I said, life happens and sometimes mail gets lost. But yes, thank you, Brittany. So I keep saying contact us. Here's the information on how to do that. So our current team is listed on the right-hand side. 3 of us are here today, but April, Janelle, myself, and Brittany, you can individually email us if you know it's an issue that one of us should be addressing. However, if you're just referring a client to us, we do ask that you either email our benefits legal help general email, or you call our intake line. You will just leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as possible, usually within 24 hours if we are currently taking clients. For example, unfortunately right now we are not because we are down an attorney, so we're at capacity, but generally we are open and we will call you back promptly. If it is just a community outreach question, like I said, put in your email, ask a lawyer, and we will respond to those even if we're at capacity, because those are not client referrals. So that is all. I will leave this on the screen just so that you have a minute longer to write anything down if necessary, and we will take any questions from any of the presentation if anyone has them.
I have a question for us. Did we talk about the difference between TANF and state family assistance? No? Okay. Cool.
Not in this presentation.
What is the difference between state family assistance and TANF?
I think Patty did talk about it at the beginning of the
Oh, did
presentation,
she?
April. I don't know if you took a
I
little
was
nap
getting
during
some
that
water,
point.
so maybe I missed that
But
part.
just
We can blame me for not paying attention to
thanks
our
for
own
bringing it up.
presentation.
You're right. I think a lot of our slides, they say TANF/FFA, don't they? And so oftentimes we do kind of mention those both interchangeably. But the SFA is the program. Oh, what does the acronym stand for? Is it state funded assistant?
I think it's just state family assistance
yeah,
is what it
state
stands
family
for.
So that would be commonly if someone doesn't meet the requirements for TANF, mostly based on immigration status, and so then they can apply for that program. Go ahead, Patty.
I was just going to say that is the only information we gave in this
Yeah.
slide, that it's an alternative to TANF for people who are ineligible due to their immigration status. We didn't go into the details, how to apply, what the pitfalls are, all of that. Might be worth doing another training.
Well, I mean, all of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, attorneys, all of the information is essentially the same application process and everything. They would just, if your immigration status isn't meeting that the immigration status for the federal TANF benefits, then Washington State would automatically just kind of screen you for the state family assistance, correct?
That's my understanding. Yeah, it's just a similar program, but provided with funds from the state rather than federal government like TANF.
Okay.
That was a great question. And to clarify, to apply for TANF or state family assistance or other programs like Medicaid or food assistance, the person would just go to washingtonconnection.org, correct? Or call DSHS?
Yeah, yep.
Nice. Well, we've had some great questions today. I want to raise a couple from the chat that have been answered, but I want to capture them for the recording. We got a question earlier asking to clarify about the diaper subsidy. Is the diaper subsidy only for families receiving TANF, or do families that receive SNAP or food benefits also qualify? And then we clarified that it is just for TANF recipients and that it is $100 per family, not per child. And then Hamid asked a good question about benefit skimming, which people experienced, particularly during the early days of the pandemic, I believe, in which essentially people were able to steal benefits from a person's card, an EBT card. Hamid asks, can DSHS help the client if somebody took their EBT card money via fraud? And then folks answer DSHS can only replace food benefits and not cash benefits at this time. If cash benefits were skimmed, they should report it to DSHS. And then there was a resource shared in the chat for where to find more information. I'm just going to post that DSHS link once more for anybody who has questions about card skimming. Then we also recommended to anybody who has been skimmed that hasn't already, they should request a new card, change their PIN, or both. Good information there. I am not seeing any more questions, but of course we will continue to take questions until about 10:55, at which point we're going to take a little break before our benefits power half hour. I have a question, just thinking about someone who has been sanctioned, which has potentially led to the termination of benefits. And has missed that 90-day appeal window. You recommend for that person to start over, like reapply for benefits fresh, or should they like maintain the connections that they've made at DSHS? Like they could call their caseworker, or they could, I don't know, even past the 90 days, try to appeal still through one of those avenues?
Think all of it, right? So it'd be worth looking to see, like Patty mentioned, if there's a good cause reason that they missed that 90 days. So they may still have rights to appeal. But also likely they'll need to reapply. And they can do them both at the same time. Even they can start that new application process. And if they ended in sanction status, then when they start back up, they're going to be still in that sanction status. So they'd have to cure it. So like we were talking about earlier, show 4 weeks of compliance or provide the information that the department was requesting. So I would say if I'm helping someone reapply and they were closed out because of a sanction, I would help them gather that information or let them know you're going to need to comply for 4 weeks with this process so that they can start that right away as soon as they get going.
Awesome. Thanks for that advice. That is helpful. Right. I want to give one last call for questions. And of course, oh, we got one from Mohammed. Okay. Okay, so peripheral questions about other benefits for applying for SSI. Should a person go to the Social Security Administration or talk to an attorney? I think I would like to share a resource from another great team called Benefits Legal Center. They work a lot with Social Security benefits, disability benefits, and they're a great place to ask questions, like their general line. I'm going to post their URL in the chat, and there's their contact information on their website. And as many of us probably know, it's a little tricky with Social Security. I mean, navigating all public benefits is tricky, but Social Security is a little different because it's federal benefits and the federal government can take very long time to process applications. There is a tremendous burden of proof to be eligible for SSI or SSDI. It's challenging, just a slightly different. Okay. Well, I just want to thank our speakers so much. Patricia, Brittany, and April, who popped in and asked an excellent question and has helped us, compile this amazing information. I just want to thank you all for your time. Folks are welcome to email our presenters or myself if you have questions later in the day or the next day or whatever. I am going to email a follow-up blog that includes the recording very likely by like Monday or Tuesday. So you'll have all of this information compiled, including this slide deck, as well as a summary of everything that we talked about. I want to give us a couple minutes of break before we start our Advocacy Power half hour. I encourage everyone to stay on the line and join us from 11 to 11:30. We'll be talking about basically if you are passionate about making these things easier to access, what are some things that you can do in the remaining days of the state legislative session so that people can have better outcomes accessing benefits to achieve their goals and sustain their households. So we would love if you stuck around for that. Before we start our break, I want to pass it back to our presenters for the final word.
Well, thank you for having us. Like you said, we're happy to continue answering questions, even if it's after the fact. If you have a specific question about the representation, please feel free to email us directly. If you have any specific client questions or scenarios, please email our general email. Please share our intake line to anyone you know who might be in need of assistance. Hopefully you learned a lot. If you have feedback, we are happy to hear it. I will stop sharing my screen here in a minute, and Brittany, if you have anything else.
Thanks so much, everyone. And thanks to everyone who attended for the important work that you're all doing in the community as well. Well, thank you.
And for those great questions. I feel like
Yeah.
this help all of us.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yay, let's give a round of applause. We are going to start in about 5 minutes in our advocacy session. Of course, presenters are welcome to stick around or go back to your busy days. I know you have other things to do. But we'll be talking for about 30 minutes about ways to activate your voice and share your experiences to motivate our lawmakers to make good choices. In the last couple of weeks of the session, I am going to pause the recording in case anybody wants to speak. Feel free to just come off mute. And I'll start the recording again at 11. Right, thanks for taking a little break with us. I want to thank our upcoming speaker for taking the time rushing down from Seattle City Hall to share some helpful advocacy tips with us so that our voices are counted in the last few days of the legislative session. Obviously, everyone who is here cares about public benefits. Let's activate those passions for our community members and advocate while we have the time.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. My name is Hallie. She, her pronouns work well for me. I'm the community policy manager here at the coalition. I did just like physically run down from City Hall and like run up the steps of our office. So if my face is a little bit red, that's why. But we are, I'm excited to share with you today some opportunities to engage in the state legislature in these last few days of the legislative session. So we are going to sort of first lay the land of the legislature, and then we'll have some opportunities to practice taking action, and we'll talk about some different ways that you can take action, including for some bills that have to do with TANF. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Tim, does that look okay?
Yes, that looks
awesome. Good. And we are going to be doing stuff together in this advocacy power half hour. So if you have meandered away from your device, you might meander back so you can join us. We're going to drop a lot of links in the chat. Kristen's going to help me with that. And we are going to practice walking through some of these steps together. So first off, we're going to practice finding our district and our state, our legislative district and our state legislators. We are going to talk about a little bit of an orientation to the legislature and what the session looks like. We'll talk about our legislative priorities here at the coalition that are still standing. We'll practice taking action, and then we'll talk about some other opportunities to take action, including ones that you can carry over to next year. Okay, so first up, we are going to practice finding our districts. So please, Kristen, if you could drop that Find Your District link in the chat, that would be great. Thank you. And this will take you to a link where you can type in your address, and it will show you your legislative district and your 2 representatives and your 1 senator. So the state is divided up into legislative districts, and each of those has your people in the legislature. So please look those up and then share your legislative district number in the chat. And feel free to let us know if you're having any problems. Awesome, looks like those are rolling in. We've got a lot of different legislative districts represented here today, which is really exciting. So when we take action later on, we will be reaching out to a bunch of different legislators. And that is really, really impactful. Fabulous. Another great tool that you can take from this link is you can click on the names of your legislators and you can find their email, you can find their phone number, you can find other information about them. So if you, you can also use this link to get in touch with your legislators. Awesome. Okay, it looks like folks are successful at finding their legislative districts. And we are going to move on to our next part, which is sort of a high level overview of the legislature. So this year, we have what's called a short session. So in Washington, we alternate between longer legislative sessions and shorter ones. This year is a short session. It ends on March 7th, which is very close. And perhaps even more important than that March 7th deadline is on March 1st, that is Friday, tomorrow is the last day for bills to leave their leave the opposite house from whence they came. So if a bill started in the House, it has to get voted on by the full Senate by tomorrow. If it started in the Senate, it has to get voted on by the full House by tomorrow. So today is an awesome time to take action and give some bills that final push to get them over the finish line. So in short session years, those are the second year of a biennial budget. In those second, those we call it supplemental budget year because they make a biennial budget during the long session for 2 years. And then in a short session like this year, they can add little bits here and there to the budget. It can happen, but it's more challenging to add significant funding and it's more challenging to pass significant legislation in short sessions just because there's not a lot of time. But I think one thing that's really important to know is that short sessions, even if significant policy doesn't move onto a law, it can be a really strategic place to start conversations or continue conversations that can take years before a bill makes it into law. So I'll give a couple examples. One bill that we supported that was introduced to the legislature was House Bill 2030, which would have allowed the great majority of people who are incarcerated to vote. So currently, if you're incarcerated for a felony, you lose your right to vote while you are in custody. This bill would have restored that right to the majority of people who are currently incarcerated on a felony. So that was super exciting right here at the coalition. We are very supportive of having everybody retain their full voting rights. And that bill didn't make it into a law this year, but it got a public hearing, which was super exciting. And that was, that was one step further than even its advocates expected it to get. So, this year it got a public hearing, maybe next year it'll get a vote, maybe next year it'll move into the opposite house, and we sort of, roll it from year to year that way. Another really good example, this one's a little tender right now, but House Bill 2114, which if you're signed up for my emails, you would have gotten a lot of emails from me about House Bill 2114 recently. It would have protected renters from any rent increases more than 7% a year. That bill unfortunately died in Senate Ways and Means on Monday. But even though it didn't make it into a law this year, it made it really far in the process. It got national attention. It was in the New York Times. If you look really closely, you can see mine and Kristen's tiny little faces in that New York Times picture. And so that's just, it's a good reminder that the fight isn't over, and it's definitely going to come back in future legislative years, and having folks turn out year over year and give that really important support. It really does matter, even if a bill doesn't make it to the finish line in that year. Okay, I've talked too much about this. So let's talk about our legislative priorities that are still, that still have a chance at making it into law. So one really big focus of ours this year is to create stable revenue for homelessness services and housing. One of these is not a bill, it's a budget request. So there's sort of two things that the legislature does. It passes bills, which can be any sort of policy change. And then it passes a budget, which is how the state distributes its money to all sorts of different things, including homelessness services and housing. This year, we are calling for them to invest $70 million to essentially prevent housing and shelter from closing statewide. There was a less than expected funding that came in from a fund source that's called the document recording fee that the state uses to fund housing and shelter. So way less came in than the state expected. And so we're asking the state to backfill that funding so that housing and shelter can keep their doors open this year. That'll be an opportunity that we can practice taking action on in a moment. We are also asking the legislature to pass what's called the Affordable Homes Act, which are these two bills, 2276 and 6191, that would create a permanent funding source for the Housing Trust Fund. That fund is used to build new affordable housing, which we really, really need in every community. And then the third thing that we'll have an opportunity to take action on today is to strengthen public benefits by reinstating the TANF child support pass-through, which is House Bill 1652. We also had a number of other legislative priorities this year that have not made it this far in the session. So you can check out our blog for more. And Kristen, if you could put the link to our blog, that would be great. I'll talk just a little bit about the TANF child support pass-through while Kristen drops that link in the chat. This one was sort of shocking to me. I learned about it this year. And what the state government does is for families that receive TANF, who also receive child support payments from a child's parent, the state skims off part of their child support payment before passing that child support payment onto the family. So the state is essentially using this, using low-income families and low-income children as like a revenue source, which we of course think is grossly inappropriate. And even though the state certainly needs revenue to do all its good work, this is not an appropriate source for that revenue, and low-income families receiving TANF need that full child support payment. So that is one that you will have opportunity to take action on in just a moment. Okay. Before we dive into practice, any questions so far on anything we've talked about? Okay. Seeing none, we will plug ahead. Okay, so one way that you can take action during the legislative session is you can email your lawmakers. So right now we have 3 links that Kristen is going to share in the chat for you to sort of choose your own adventure for what you want to take action on. So if you are signed up for email alerts from the coalition or from other organizations, you will often get emails like this that ask you to email your legislators and tell them why a bill matters to you. The most important thing is to take action. It takes less than a minute. It's really, really fast. If you have time and energy, and I get that sometimes that's not the case, and sometimes I don't do this either, but it can be really helpful if you can personalize the first couple sentences a little. So for example, when I was writing my legislators a lot on House Bill 2114 for rent stabilization, I would say, I'm a renter in your district. My rent has gone up every year. You know, I'm really concerned about my neighbors who might lose their housing because their rent keeps going up and up and up. So if you're able to personalize it, talking about your own experience or your job or your family or someone you know, that is always really impactful. And the other thing I'll say about this is we get some questions back to us sometimes of like, why are you asking me to take action 100 times? I already did it once. I'm really worried I'm going to annoy my legislators by emailing them again and again and again. I get that, right? We don't want to bother people, but at the same time, it is really important to take action multiple times because for a couple of reasons. One reason is that as bills and budget items move through the legislature, they touch different groups of people. So that's, our job is to make it easy for you to track all those things. And we will, send you action alerts at strategic times in the legislative process where bills need that extra push to get them through a new group of people. And it's also important for folks to know that there's momentum behind these bills and that we're still watching, we're still paying attention, and we still support it. So once you have chosen your own adventure and you've sent an email, go ahead and put a thumbs up emoji. Awesome. Fabulous. I'm seeing a few thumbs up. You can put another emoji if you want, I guess. Awesome. Wonderful. All right, so that's a really quick and easy way to take action. I hope that now you've done it once, you will feel hopefully a little more comfortable to do it again. And I just want to reiterate, please do take action multiple times on, as bills move through the process. It's really, really important. Okay. Another way you can take action is by calling your legislators. So if you have maybe a little more time, but still a really quick way to take action, you can call the legislative hotline. That's this number, 1-800-562-6000. And you will talk to a real human and you can tell them, what legislative district you live in now that you know that. And say, I really want to leave a comment on this child support pass-through bill. I really think that, families receiving TANF should receive their full child support payment, and I want to tell my elected officials that. And they will pass on your message to your elected officials. If you have more time, you can actually go to Olympia and testify, or now that, one COVID era innovation that was really cool is you can testify online. And this can be a really important way for you to share your story with legislators, especially if you have, relevant experience that you want to share. And we can always offer support and help walk you through the process. We can help you come up with talking points. So we are a good resource to you if you have a bill that you want to testify on and share your story to the legislature. And finally, this is one that we'll take to next year with us, because all of our advocacy days have come and gone this year, but advocacy days can be a really fun and exciting way to join community in Olympia and really have a show of force for bills or ideas that you support. So this year, the coalition went to the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance's Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Days. We took about 30 people with us on a bus. And we spent the day in Olympia talking to our lawmakers, rallying on the steps. That's where that New York Times photo came from. So it was it was just a really rich experience and really good experience to be in community with folks who are all excited about the same thing. So that is sort of a menu of ways to take action. Again, some of these are still good for this year. So emailing your legislators and taking action is probably the best way to take action now that we're in the last week of session. And then others of these, like attending an advocacy day or giving testimony, those will be good to take over to next year as well. Okay. That is the end of my slideshow, and we are ahead of time. Hooray. I hope I didn't talk too fast, but happy to answer any questions or give advice if folks have questions about how to engage with the legislative session. Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. We're tired. We've been online for 3 hours. Thank you for sticking with us. It's nice to not talk to an empty room.
I don't have a question, but I do just want to validate and second everything that Holly said. I have been going to state advocacy kind of like lobby days and like sending emails for a couple of years now, but like I started very scared and optimistic and hopeful and just like, oh, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I have an opportunity to like share my voice because I personally have experience of homelessness and being in benefit systems and want my lawmakers to know that. And while your experience with your specific lawmakers may vary, at baseline, they will hear you because they have to, because you elect them. And as your constituent, they are beholden to that. They are required to listen to you and not make you feel uninvited, at very least. And sometimes it's a really wonderful experience. I had a great experience this year talking to my representative in the 32nd district, Lauren Davis, who's also a renter. We talked about rent stabilization, and she was super sympathetic. She commiserated with me. She was like, oh my God, isn't it crazy how that can happen? While that effort is not happening this year, I know that like I can feel confident in future years that my representative supports me. And some people are on the fence. I know, Holly, you've talked about your legislator, Jamie Peterson being on the fence about rent stabilization, but folks flipped him because they kept bugging him about it. It really does make a difference when we talk to people, talk to our legislators.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes
I think that's a great point, Tim. Thank you. I want to echo that because I was just sort of reflecting on this yesterday. Because like before I had this job, I didn't know that any of this stuff actually mattered. Like I didn't know that it actually mattered to email your legislators, but they actually do listen. Like I had Jamie Peterson, who's my senator, email me back on my personal email, not like separate from work, right? So he doesn't know necessarily that I work in policy. Email me back and like actually have a dialogue with me about rent stabilization. And you know, it certainly wasn't me who pushed him to change his mind and to become supportive of it, but it was a combination of everybody reaching out to him and sharing, you know, this is important to me and you represent me, so it should be important to you too. And our champions in the legislature, Nicole Macri, she says this every time she has an audience with us, but sometimes we need to flood folks' inboxes to really show that this stuff matters. So that's all just to say it really does matter. And please join us in taking action. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Feel free to email me if you have questions. Tim, is there anything else we need to do to wrap up?
I don't think so. I do want to stop the recording just in case people have questions that they don't want to answer on the recording. So I'll say thank you to everyone who's watching us in the future and stop the recording.